My name is Leona, and I'm 57 years old. 3 years ago, I thought losing my husband Robert to a sudden heart attack was the worst pain I'd ever endure. I was wrong. The real devastation came when my own daughter looked me in the eye and called me a pathetic burden, telling me to get a job or get out of my own home. When Sarah moved back after college, I believed we'd heal together, support each other through grief. I never imagined she'd scream that I was living off her like a leech. I didn't argue back or defend myself. Instead, I quietly visited my lawyer and completely rewrote my will, cutting her inheritance from over $1 million down to almost nothing. Before I share what happened when she discovered what I'd done, let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and please hit that like button and subscribe. You won't believe how dramatically things changed when she realized the consequences of her words. To understand how our relationship crumbled so completely, you need to know the foundation we started from. Robert and I purchased our 4-bedroom colonial house in suburban Portland, Oregon, back in 1995. I taught 3rd grade at St. Mary's Elementary School for 20 years, while Robert worked as a civil engineer for the city. We weren't wealthy by any means, but we managed our finances, carefully paid off our mortgage early, and built a comfortable life centered around our daughter, Sarah. Sarah graduated from Portland State University in 2019 with a marketing degree and immediately landed her first professional position as a marketing assistant, earning $45,000 annually. She rented a cramped studio apartment downtown that consumed nearly half her monthly income. Life seemed to be moving forward according to plan until January of 2022, when Robert collapsed from a massive heart attack while shoveling snow from our driveway. The life insurance payout of $180,000 provided financial cushioning during my grief, but the emotional devastation left me completely unable to return to my classroom. What started as compassionate leave from St. Mary's eventually became permanent retirement. I spent months wandering through our house like a ghost, unable to focus on anything beyond basic survival. During those dark winter months, Sarah visited regularly, bringing groceries and checking on my well-being. She witnessed firsthand how lost I'd become in our suddenly oversized house, surrounded by Robert's belongings and memories in every corner. One March evening, as we sat in the kitchen where Robert used to drink his morning coffee and read the newspaper, Sarah made what seemed like a genuinely caring proposal. "Mom, what if I moved back home for a while?" she suggested, reaching across the worn wooden table to squeeze my trembling hand. "I hate imagining you here all alone every night, and honestly, my rent downtown is absolutely crushing my budget. Maybe we could help each other through this difficult time." The suggestion filled me with unexpected warmth. I immediately began imagining us cooking meals together, sharing stories over dinner, maybe even working side by side in Robert's beloved vegetable garden when spring arrived. Sarah proposed paying $400 monthly to cover her childhood bedroom, which seemed perfectly reasonable for our arrangement. What Sarah didn't realize, because I chose not burden her with financial details, while she was processing her own grief, was that I wasn't struggling economically. Beyond the life insurance money Robert and I had accumulated, $320,000 in savings through decades of careful budgeting. Our house, now completely mortgage-free, had been appraised at $580,000. Additionally, my teacher's retirement account contained $240,000. I was actually quite financially secure, but discussing money felt inappropriate when we were both mourning. Those initial months fulfilled every hope I'd harbored. Having youthful energy back in our home felt like receiving a precious gift. Sarah maintained her routine of leaving for work by 8 each morning, which gave me purpose-filled days of cooking nutritious meals, maintaining our household, tending Robert's rose bushes and tomato plants, and preparing elaborate dinners for her return. Our evening meals became the highlight of my days. Sarah would share amusing stories about her colleagues, describe challenging projects she was tackling, and express her ambitions for career advancement. I felt genuinely useful again, needed, rather than merely existing in my grief-stricken state. Unfortunately, the harmony began deteriorating gradually. Sarah started arriving home increasingly late, sometimes well past 11, on school nights. She began inviting friends over with minimal advance notice, and her guests would consume the groceries I'd purchased and the meals I'd prepared, leaving dirty dishes scattered throughout the kitchen and food crumbs ground into the carpets. When I gently requested some advance warning about overnight visitors, she'd dismiss my concerns, saying things like, "Mom, I can't schedule every social interaction. Sometimes people just spontaneously drop by." Our first significant confrontation occurred in June, roughly 6 months after Sarah had returned home. She'd been dating Marcus, a 26-year-old tech sales representative, for several weeks. Marcus possessed an arrogant confidence that immediately rubbed me the wrong way, but I carefully kept my reservations to myself because Sarah appeared genuinely happy. One Friday evening, while I was watering the tomato seedlings that Robert had always cultivated with such pride, Sarah approached me with what sounded more like a demand than a request. "Mom, I need your car this weekend. Marcus wants to drive me to the Oregon coast, but his vehicle is getting repaired at the shop." I hesitated, feeling uncomfortable with the assumption. My Honda Accord represented my independence, my connection to the outside world for grocery shopping, medical appointments, and visits to my sister, Patricia, in Seattle. "Sweetheart, I was actually planning to visit Patricia on Sunday afternoon. Perhaps you and Marcus could consider renting a vehicle for your trip." Sarah's expression immediately darkened, her cheerful demeanor evaporating instantly. "Seriously, you're literally sitting around the house all day while I'm busting my ass at work, and you can't even let me use your car for one measly weekend. What exactly do you accomplish during your days anyway?" Her accusation felt like a physical slap. I dedicated my entire days to maintaining our household, preparing her favorite meals, washing her clothes without being asked, keeping every room spotless and welcoming. "Sarah, I take complete care of our home. I cook all your meals, handle all the cleaning, maintain your father's garden. I'm also seriously considering returning to substitute teaching this fall." "Right," she responded with a harsh, bitter laugh that I'd never heard from her before. "Well, while you're considering maybe working someday, I'm actually working every single day. And paying rent here, by the way, which apparently counts for nothing." Her response confused me deeply. $400 monthly barely covered our utility expenses, completely, ignoring property taxes, homeowners insurance maintenance costs, and general upkeep. Our total monthly expenses approached $2,800, which I covered entirely through my savings and Robert's life insurance funds. However, pointing out these financial realities felt petty and materialistic, so I silently handed over my car keys. That coastal weekend established a troubling pattern. Marcus began spending increasing amounts of time in our home, and Sarah started treating my basic requests for household courtesy as unreasonable impositions on her freedom. When our monthly electricity bill jumped dramatically from $120 to $280, because Sarah constantly ran the air conditioning and left lights burning throughout the house, I approached her about being more mindful of energy consumption. "I shouldn't have to live like I'm camping in the wilderness just because you're obsessed with being cheap," she snapped defensively. "If you're genuinely worried about utility bills, maybe you should find actual employment instead of lecturing me about leaving a few lights on." I attempted to explain that my concern wasn't about being frugal, but about being environmentally and financially responsible. But Sarah had already stormed away to her bedroom, slamming the door behind her. That night I lay awake wondering when my compassionate, thoughtful daughter had transformed into this angry, entitled stranger. The grief counselor I'd consulted after Robert's death had warned me that families sometimes turn on each other while processing profound loss, but I never imagined it would happen to us. By August, Marcus was essentially living in our home full-time. He'd arrive directly from work with Sarah each evening and remain through entire weekends, using our shower facilities, consuming the meals I'd prepared with care, and treating our living spaces like his personal entertainment center. He'd abandon his dirty clothes in the laundry room and leave food-stained dishes scattered across the coffee table. When I diplomatically suggested that perhaps he could contribute to grocery expenses since he was eating so many meals with us, Sarah's reaction was explosive. "This is my home too, and Marcus is my boyfriend," she declared with shocking hostility. "I pay rent here, which means I have every right to invite guests whenever I choose." I struggled to maintain my composure. "Of course you can have guests, sweetheart. I simply think it's reasonable to ask for basic communication about overnight visitors and their frequency." "Communication?" Sarah's voice escalated dramatically. "You mean permission. You want me to beg for permission like I'm still a teenager living under your thumb." The situation reached a devastating climax on a Saturday night in late August. I'd retired to bed around 10:30, but jarring music and loud laughter jolted me awake at 2 in the morning. Peering through my bedroom window, I discovered at least 12 unfamiliar cars parked along our street and filling our driveway. Sarah had apparently organized an impromptu party without mentioning it to me whatsoever. I wrapped myself in my bathrobe and descended to find my living room packed with strangers, many obviously intoxicated drinking beer and mixed cocktails throughout the house. Someone had spilled red wine across Robert's favorite reading chair, the leather armchair where he'd spent countless evenings. The kitchen looked like a disaster zone with pizza boxes and empty bottles covering every available surface. Most devastating of all, I discovered that someone had invaded Robert's private home office, apparently searching for a bathroom, leaving muddy footprints tracked across his precious antique Persian rug. I located Sarah in the kitchen laughing loudly with a group of her colleagues. When I approached her trying desperately to keep my voice calm and controlled, she immediately became confrontational. "What's your problem now?" she said loudly enough for everyone around us to hear clearly. "Sarah, you never told me you were hosting a party tonight. It's after 2 in the morning and I'm certain the neighbors will be calling with complaints." "God, Mom, you are so incredibly dramatic about everything," she replied, rolling her eyes theatrically for her audience's entertainment. "We're just having a few casual friends over for drinks." "There are complete strangers in your father's office," I said, my voice beginning to shake with emotion. "Someone has spilled wine all over his favorite chair." "It's just material possessions, Mom. Dad is gone forever. You can't transform this entire house into some kind of sacred memorial shrine." Her words struck me like a devastating physical blow. I stood there for several moments, surrounded by drunken strangers in my own home, staring at my daughter as if I was truly seeing her clearly for the first time in months. Without uttering another word, I returned upstairs and spent the remainder of the night cleaning up the destruction, after her friends finally departed around 4 in the morning. The following day, I requested a serious conversation with Sarah about establishing reasonable boundaries for our shared living situation. I calmly explained that I needed advance notification for parties, that overnight guests should be limited to weekends only, and that Robert's office must remain off-limits to everyone except immediate family members. Sarah's response was swift and absolutely brutal. "You act like you completely own this place." "Oh wait, you actually do, but that doesn't give you any right to control every aspect of my adult life. I'm 28 years old, Mom. I'm not your helpless little girl anymore." "I'm not attempting to control you," I replied carefully. "I'm trying to establish some fundamental respect for our shared living environment." "Our shared living space?" Sarah laughed with genuine bitterness. "I pay money to live here. You just exist here like a piece of furniture." That evening I called my sister Patricia in Seattle. Through heartbroken tears, I described everything that had been happening over the past several months. Patricia, who'd always been the stronger and more direct of the two of us, was absolutely furious after hearing my story. "Leona, you're allowing her to completely walk all over you," Patricia said firmly. "She's treating you like a resentful landlord, instead of the loving mother who raised her with devotion. You absolutely must stand up for yourself before this situation becomes even worse." I promised Patricia I'd attempt another serious conversation with Sarah, but part of me was beginning to realize that my daughter might be too far gone for simple discussions to repair our damaged relationship. On a Tuesday evening in October, after weeks of continuously mounting tension and hostility, I decided the time had arrived for Sarah and me to have a completely honest discussion about our future living arrangement and relationship. She'd just been passed over for a promotion at work that afternoon, and I could tell she'd been drinking wine steadily since arriving home at 6 o'clock. I invested extra time preparing her absolute favorite dinner, chicken parmesan with homemade garlic bread, hoping that this gesture of love might create the proper atmosphere for productive conversation. As we settled down at our kitchen table to eat, I attempted to begin the discussion gently and positively. "Sarah, I've been seriously thinking about returning to teaching, maybe finding some part-time substitute positions or private tutoring opportunities in the community." Sarah looked up from her plate, her eyes already glassy and unfocused from the wine she'd been consuming. "Oh, fantastic, so now you're planning to abandon me too, exactly like Dad did when he died." The comparison between my desire to work and Robert's tragic death left me completely speechless for several moments. "Sweetheart, I'm absolutely not abandoning you. I simply believe it would be beneficial for me to have some sense of purpose again, and maybe contribute more substantially to our household expenses." "Contribute more?" Sarah's voice began rising ominously. "You've been living off me for months and months. I'm the one actually paying bills around here." I felt genuinely confused by her growing anger. "Sarah, you contribute $400 monthly. Our annual property taxes alone cost almost $3,000, not including homeowners' insurance utility bills, maintenance expenses, groceries, and general upkeep costs." "I don't care about any of that," she screamed, slamming her wine glass down so violently that it cracked along the base. "You're nothing but a burden. You sit around this house all day accomplishing absolutely nothing while I work my ass off every single day. Get a job or get out of my life." The venomous words hung in the air between us like deadly poison. I felt my heart begin racing frantically, my hands trembling uncontrollably as I processed the shocking cruelty of what she'd just said to me. This wasn't simple anger or temporary frustration. This was calculated, deliberate cruelty. "I'm 28 years old and I'm completely stuck taking care of my pathetic, useless mother." Sarah continued, her voice growing louder and more vicious with each word. "Marcus is absolutely right about you. You're just a parasitic leech. No wonder Dad had a heart attack, probably from all the stress of supporting your lazy ass forever." The mention of Robert, combined with the suggestion that my very existence had somehow contributed to his death, shattered something deep inside me that I didn't even realize could break. I felt as though she'd reached directly into my chest and crushed my heart until it stopped beating entirely. For several terrifying moments I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process that these devastating words were actually coming from the precious little girl I'd read bedtime stories to every night, the teenager I'd cheered for at countless soccer games, the young woman I'd embraced proudly at her college graduation ceremony. I stood up from the table very slowly and deliberately, my legs shaking beneath me like fragile branches. When I finally spoke, my voice emerged as barely more than a whisper. "I understand perfectly. I'll carefully think about everything you've said tonight." Sarah, apparently satisfied that she'd successfully made her point, and won. Our confrontation leaned back in her chair with a smugly triumphant expression. Good. It's about damn time you finally grew up and faced reality. I walked upstairs to the bedroom Robert and I had shared lovingly for 26 years of marriage. I sat on the edge of our bed, my hands still trembling violently as I replayed every single word she'd spoken. Burden, pathetic, leech. The daughter I'd sacrificed everything for, worried constantly about, and loved unconditionally for 28 years saw me as nothing more than dead weight she was forced to carry through life. Sleep was impossible that night. Instead, I spent the dark hours sitting in Robert's home office, surrounded by his cherished books and the framed photographs of our family during much happier times. There was 5-year-old Sarah, missing both front teeth, grinning proudly as she displayed the fish she'd caught during our camping trip to Crater Lake. 16-year-old Sarah rolling her eyes but smiling radiantly as Robert and I embarrassed her with endless photographs before her homecoming dance. 22-year-old Sarah walking confidently across the graduation stage while Robert and I cheered enthusiastically from the packed audience. Where had I gone so terribly wrong? How had the sweet, loving child captured in these precious photographs transformed into someone capable of speaking to me with such devastating contempt and cruelty? The following morning, Sarah departed for work without acknowledging my existence, as if our life-changing conversation had never occurred. She walked past me in the kitchen, like I was completely invisible, grabbed her usual cup of coffee, and headed out the front door without a single word. The casual dismissal somehow hurt even more profoundly than her cruel words from the previous evening. Around 10 that morning, I telephoned James Morrison, the estate planning attorney who'd helped Robert and me draft our original wills 5 years earlier. His secretary managed to accommodate me with an appointment that same afternoon, sensing the urgency in my voice. "Leona," James said warmly, as I settled into the leather chair across from his impressive mahogany desk. "What can I do for you today?" I explained the devastating situation as calmly as possible, though my voice trembled noticeably when I repeated Sarah's exact words from the night before. James listened attentively without interrupting, occasionally nodding sympathetically or making brief notes on his legal pad. "I want to completely change my will," I stated finally. "Currently, Sarah inherits everything I own. I want to change that immediately." James leaned back thoughtfully in his chair. "Leona, family conflicts can be extraordinarily painful, but are you absolutely certain this is the appropriate response? Sometimes a cooling-off period can help family members gain perspective." "She called me pathetic and commanded me to get out of my own home," I replied firmly. "She suggested that my husband probably died from the stress of financially supporting me. I don't believe any amount of time will fix that level of complete disrespect and cruelty." We spent the next hour meticulously reviewing my substantial assets. The house worth $580,000, my savings account containing $320,000, my retirement account with $240,000. Under my current will, Sarah would inherit absolutely everything, making her worth over $1 million upon my death. "Here's exactly what I want to do," I told James with complete certainty. 50% to my sister Patricia, who's always been supportive and loving throughout my life. 30% to St. Mary's Elementary School, where I taught dedicated for 20 years. 15% to the American Heart Association, in Robert's memory. And 5% to Sarah, with the strict condition that she complete professional grief counseling. James raised his eyebrows significantly. "That represents quite a dramatic change, Leona. Are you absolutely certain about this decision?" "My daughter made it crystal clear that she sees me as nothing but a burden," I said. "I want my life's assets to go to people and organizations who will genuinely appreciate them and use them constructively." The legal paperwork required approximately 3 hours to complete properly and thoroughly. We drafted the comprehensive new will, had it officially notarized by a certified notary public, and filed copies with James's law firm for safekeeping. As I signed the final page with my full legal signature, I experienced a strange mixture of profound sadness and unexpected relief. Sadness for the loving relationship Sarah and I would apparently never share, but relief that I'd finally taken complete control of my own dignity and self-respect. I drove home feeling lighter and more empowered than I had in months. When Sarah arrived that evening with Marcus in tow, I had dinner prepared and waiting as usual. They consumed the meal without expressing any gratitude whatsoever, abandoned their dirty dishes on the table, and disappeared upstairs to watch Netflix in her bedroom. I cleaned up alone in the kitchen, exactly as I had for months, but somehow the entire experience felt fundamentally different. I was no longer a burden in my own home. I was a woman who'd made a powerful choice. 3 days later, on Friday afternoon, Sarah was casually sorting through the Daily Mail delivery when she discovered an official envelope from Morrison & Associates law firm. I was outside in the garden, carefully deadheading Robert's prized rose bushes, when I heard her voice calling my name from inside the house. I entered through the kitchen door to find her standing frozen near the counter, holding several pages of legal documents in her trembling hands. Her face had turned completely pale, and her hands were visibly shaking as she stared at the papers. "Mom, what exactly is this?" she asked, her voice much smaller and more uncertain than it had been during our previous confrontation. "Why did you change your will without telling me?" I washed my hands thoroughly at the kitchen sink, taking my time to dry them completely with a clean towel before turning to face her directly. "You told me I was a burden and should get out of your life. I'm simply planning accordingly for that possibility." "I was just extremely upset that night," Sarah said quickly, her words tumbling together. "I didn't mean those things literally. You know I didn't actually mean any of it." "You called me pathetic and a parasitic leech," I replied with complete calm. "You suggested that your father probably died from the stress of financially supporting me. That seemed extremely literal and intentional to me." I watched Sarah's eyes frantically scanning the legal documents rapidly, calculating exactly what she was losing through her own actions. From inheriting over $1 million to receiving just $57,000, and only if she completed mandatory grief counseling. The magnitude of her catastrophic miscalculation was written clearly across her shocked face. "You absolutely can't do this to me," she said, her voice rising to the same hysterical pitch it had reached during our fight. "This house, all this money, it's supposed to be mine. I'm your only daughter. It was supposed to be yours when you loved and respected me as your mother," I said. "Now it will go to people and organizations who actually do appreciate what I've worked for." Just then, Marcus came down the stairs, apparently drawn by the sound of Sarah's increasingly raised voice. When she frantically explained what had happened, he immediately inserted himself into our private family conversation. "You can't just cut out your own daughter like this," he said to me, his face reddening with indignation. "That's completely unfair and vindictive." "I can and I have," I replied steadily. "My daughter cut me out emotionally first. I'm simply making my financial arrangements match my current emotional reality." Sarah began crying, then not the angry tears of our previous fight, but desperate, panicked tears of someone who'd just realized the enormous consequences of their actions. "Mom, please don't do this. I'm so sorry I said those horrible things. I didn't mean any of them. You know I love you. If you genuinely want to rebuild our relationship, we can certainly discuss that possibility," I said. "But the will remains exactly as it is until I see real, lasting change in your behavior and attitude." Words are easy, Sarah. Actions and consistent behavior matter much more. Marcus started to say something else, but I held up my hand firmly. This is between my daughter and me exclusively. I think it would be best if you left us to discuss this privately." Sarah looked to Marcus for support and backup, but he was clearly calculating his own losses in this situation. If Sarah wasn't going to inherit substantial money anymore, she'd become a much less attractive long-term prospect for him. Without another word, he went upstairs to collect his belongings and personal items. "Please, Mom," Sarah begged desperately after Marcus had left the house. "I know I hurt you terribly. I know saying sorry isn't nearly enough to fix what I've done. But please don't destroy my entire future over this." "I'm not doing anything destructive to you, Sarah," I said. "I'm simply deciding how to distribute my own life's assets. If you genuinely like to discuss rebuilding our mother-daughter relationship, I'm completely willing to listen. But that's entirely separate from my estate planning decisions." That evening, Sarah packed a large suitcase and left with Marcus for his apartment. As I watched them drive away down our quiet street, I felt sad, but absolutely not sorry. For the first time in many months, I was going to sleep peacefully in a house where I felt respected and valued, even if I was the only person there. The following 2 weeks passed in absolutely blissful quiet and tranquility. I awakened each morning in my spotlessly clean house, prepared coffee for just myself, and spent my days reading beloved books, tending to Robert's garden, and rediscovering activities I genuinely enjoyed before becoming Sarah's unpaid housekeeper and emotional punching bag. I called Patricia regularly and told her about everything that had transpired. Instead of being shocked by my dramatic decision, she was incredibly proud of me. "It's about time you stood up for yourself properly," Patricia said firmly. "Robert would have been absolutely furious if he'd heard how she was treating you with such disrespect." I also began receiving numerous phone calls from Sarah throughout this period. Initially, they were angry, demanding calls where she accused me of being selfish, vindictive, manipulative, and cruel. She claimed I was trying to control her through money and emotional blackmail. But as the days continued passing, the calls gradually became more desperate and genuinely pleading. On the 14th day of our separation, my phone rang 21 times consecutively. I deliberately didn't answer the first 20 calls, but something about the persistence of the 21st call compelled me to pick up. "Mom," Sarah's voice was completely broken, barely audible above a whisper. "I'm so sorry. I'm so incredibly sorry. I don't understand why I said those awful things to you." For the first time and since our devastating fight, I heard genuine remorse and regret in her voice, instead of just panic about losing her inheritance money. "I've been thinking constantly about what you said," she continued through obvious tears. "About Dad, about calling you pathetic and useless. I was so completely wrong about everything. I was angry about losing Dad, frustrated with my job, feeling stuck in my life, and I took all that pain and anger out on you instead of dealing with it properly." We talked for over 3 hours that night, the longest honest conversation we'd had in years. Sarah admitted that she'd been struggling with severe grief and depression since Robert's death, but had been too proud and stubborn to ask for professional help or support. She'd watched me retreat into myself after losing him, and had felt abandoned and alone, even though she understood intellectually that I was grieving just as deeply as she was. "I felt like I lost both my parents when Dad died," she said through heartbroken sobs. "You became this distant ghost of yourself, and I was so angry that you got to just stop working and stop participating in normal life, while I had to keep pretending everything was fine and continue going to work every day. Why didn't you tell me you were feeling abandoned and angry?" I asked gently. "Because you were so devastatingly sad all the time," she replied. "I thought I had to be strong and independent for both of us, but I wasn't actually strong at all. I was just angry and resentful and taking it out on the wrong person." I suggested that we both begin attending family therapy sessions together, and Sarah agreed immediately and enthusiastically. She also made the decision to move out permanently, finding a modest studio apartment she could afford entirely on her own salary. Marcus, exactly as I'd predicted, disappeared completely from her life as soon as he realized she wouldn't be inheriting substantial money after all. Our first session with Dr. Amanda Reeves proved to be an absolute revelation for both of us. In a safe, neutral, professional environment, Sarah was able to express her complex feelings about her father's death without attacking me personally, and I was able to explain how her words had devastated me without making her feel hopeless about repairing our relationship. "Sarah, ma'am," Dr. Reeves said during our third session, "it sounds like you blamed your mother for surviving when your father didn't. Is that an accurate assessment?" Sarah broke down, completely sobbing uncontrollably. "Yes, that's exactly right. I know it doesn't make any logical sense, but I was so furious that she got to stay alive while he had to die. I wanted her to hurt just as much as I was hurting every single day." Over the course of 6 months of weekly therapy sessions, we slowly and carefully rebuilt our relationship on a solid foundation of honesty and mutual respect, instead of unspoken expectations and resentment. Sarah received the promotion she'd been passed over for, earlier began paying for her own therapy sessions independently, and started taking genuine responsibility for her emotional health instead of expecting me to absorb and process her pain. 1 year later, I updated my will again with James's assistance. I decided to leave 70% of my assets to Sarah, with the remaining 30% split between Patricia and the charitable organizations I'd chosen. However, I kept the provision requiring grief counseling, and I added a new clause requiring Sarah to write a thoughtful letter explaining what she'd learned about respect and healthy family relationships. When I informed Sarah about this change, she surprised me by saying, "Keep it exactly the way it was. Mom, you taught me that love and respect have to be genuinely earned, not just expected because of blood relations. If I want to inherit your legacy, I should prove that I deserve it through my action." Looking back now, I realize that the most loving thing I ever did for my daughter was showing her that her behavior had real consequences. When she called me a burden and told me to get out, I could have argued, cried, or begged her to take back her words. Instead, I quietly removed the reward she was expecting for treating me so poorly. Sometimes, the greatest gift you can give someone you love is allowing them to experience the full consequences of their actions. Sarah learned that love without boundaries isn't actually love at all. It's just enabling destructive behavior. And I learned that being a mother doesn't mean accepting abuse even from your own child. Our relationship today is stronger and more honest than it ever was before our crisis. Sarah visits every week, and we cook dinner together in the same kitchen where she once screamed at me so cruelly. We discuss our feelings openly and honestly instead of walking on eggshells around each other. She's grown into a woman I'm genuinely proud of, not because she never makes mistakes, but because she takes responsibility for them when she does. The will I maintain now reflects the relationship we've built together, one based on mutual respect rather than financial obligation or family guilt. And sometimes, when I'm working in Robert's garden, and Sarah stops by after work to help me water the roses he loved so much, I think about how proud he would be of both of us for finding our way back to each other through honesty and accountability. Because sometimes, the scariest thing you can do is exactly the thing that sets you both free. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with someone you love, even when it felt like it might destroy your relationship? I'd love to hear your experiences and thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched your heart or made you think about your own family relationships, please give it a like and subscribe for more real-life stories about family love and finding the courage to demand respect. Don't forget to share this video with someone who might need to hear that it's absolutely okay to require respect even from the people closest to you. Thank you so much for listening to my story and taking this emotional journey with me. Remember that you deserve to be treated with love and genuine respect in every relationship in your life. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next story.